Right, hello and welcome back to yet another video. Today it's going to be on the Bruin. As I mentioned, I was going to be doing some how-tos on this bike. Might not be the most entertaining, but it might be for some, depending on who you are and what you're into. But anyway, today I'm going to be changing the ball joints. As you can see on this, they are well gone. Look at the upper, it's completely out of its housing. That would be a quite dangerous bike to ride like that. If it was the lower ball joint, it would have probably fell apart already. I'm going to run quite quick through this how-to. It's not very rare I watch them nowadays, but when I do watch them, half the time you've got somebody rambling, he doesn't really know what they're doing, and you may as well not watch them. So I'm going to run through pretty quick. First thing, take your wheel off. 417mm nuts. If you don't know how to take a wheel off, don't do a ball joint. Now you can go about it several ways. It really depends on your bike and and what section the ball joint's cast in or pressed into. On this particular bike, you've got a ball joint pressed into your upper control arm for the upper ball joint, and you've got the lower ball joint is pressed into the steering knuckle, as you can see there. So I'm going to have to basically disassemble this entire front portion of the suspension. One thing I'll say, if you're considering doing this job, it's simple in theory, but if you've never messed with a bike before, you'll probably end up getting stuck or having trouble, because oftentimes components are completely seized and they can be a pain in the ass. Normally, if your bike's old enough to need ball joints, unless you're a farmer who dailies it, it'll be quite an old bike. So on this particular bike, take the split pin out, holding the nut in, holds the front knuckle on. Take the 24mm nut off from the washer. That's the first thing I do. Then I'm going to need to remove the top control arm on this, so disconnect your shock absorber, pull that right out of the way, then take the two bolts out for your upper control arm. You're going to need to take your track rod off. That's on this bike it's a 19mm nut and a 14mm holder to stop it spinning. Oh, these nuts, by the way, are 17mm on the inside, 14mm on the outside. So once you've got all that off, then you need to remove the lower control arm. You can either remove the whole lower control arm, or you can just remove the nut holding the lower control arm ball joint in on this particular bike. I'm probably going to remove just the nut holding the ball joint in, because them bolts can be extremely tight to get out unless you take all the front cover off and use an impact on them. So right now I'm going to finish undoing the nut for the track rod. I'm going to undo that nut at the bottom and then I'll be back. Okay, so the track rod is removed and I've got that lower ball joint out of the lower control arm. Don't be afraid to hit the lower control arm or the ball joint quite hard to get it off. It is just pushed into there. It's not pressed in, so to speak, so it won't do it any harm. Also, try and avoid stretching your brake line too much. Mine's fine as it is. As you can see, oh, there you go, that's what I mean about the brake line. As you can see with this track rod, it's in good condition. When you do this, it's a good opportunity to replace these, so take a good look at them. You want to move them up and down while also holding the top, and if they pull in and out at all, they're knackered. This one's absolutely fine. Also push it in and out while holding the shaft like so. Again, this one's fine. Ball joints is one of them jobs. This bike isn't actually too bad, although the top ball joint is gone. You'll often find a lot of the other bushes are knackered. Yamaha bushes are incredibly tough. They last pretty much forever. But Arctic Cat bushes like that over there, once the ball joint's gone, every bush in the suspension will be gone. So be prepared, unless you've got a Yamaha bike, to be replacing an awful lot of stuff when you get to do this. So now we've got all that apart, we can take our caliper off, which I'll do now. You also need to remove this 10mm retainer for the brake line, and then I'll be able to pull this whole assembly out of the axle. So I'll take the caliper off. That's two 12mm nuts, or bolts should I say, one at the top, one at the bottom, and that 10mm, and I'll be back once this whole assembly is free. Okay, so once you've undone your caliper bolts, you can unscrew it along with the, well, you can remove it slide it off along with the disc and the actual little splined hub. So now all you're left with is the actual hub assembly itself. Now you can get full access to the bottom nut to remove the lower control arm, which I'll do now. Obviously you need an impact to remove these, something I didn't mention earlier. So I want to remove that bottom control arm. I'll be back, and I'm probably going to, well, I am going to remove this back plate guard as well, because it'll make life easier for us. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so now I've got them off, and we're left with the two components we need to actually replace the ball joints in. So we've got our knuckle here, and we've got our upper control arm. You can see just how bad these joints are. I mean, obviously that one's completely shot. But look how much that moves up and down. I have never, well, I have seen a lot before, to be honest, but what causes this is the rubber's split. People don't replace them, and look at that. The chrome's gone. It's been grinding away in there for years. And the bottom one's not much better. Obviously it's not actually gone through at the top, but there's a serious amount of play in that. So yeah, it's just wobbling around everywhere. If we grab our new one, so obviously there's no play at all, and it's fairly stiff to move it about. That's what they should be like. So when it comes to actually replacing these, you've got a couple of options. Obviously they get pushed in from the actual shaft end downwards, like so, and then they get a C-clip put around them. So you've got a couple of ways you can remove them. You can either undo that C-clip and press them out from the top, or hammer them out from the top, if like me you haven't actually got a press, or you can simply cut the C-clip off, which we've done before in the Arctic Cat video, and hammer them out, and that generally makes it a lot easier, because this top bit is ever so slightly thicker than the bottom piece, and obviously you haven't got to wrestle to take the C-clip off after they've been corroding in there for years and years and years. I always try to remove the C-clips to start with before cutting them, but as you can see with that, the chances of, well, you would get that C-clip off, but the time it would take you to remove it, you're far better off just cutting it. You're not going to hurt the arm or the knuckle, as long as you're careful and you don't go into it. It's alright to just skim a tiny bit, but you don't want to be cutting into the arm or the actual knuckle. So I'll cut both them off, and I'll come back to you. So I'm basically just going to slice flat along the arm top, cut the top of the ball joint off, same on that one, and I'll be back. Okay, right, so I've removed the joints from the knuckle and the control arm. As you can see, I've barely touched the surface of either, so that's absolutely fine. I do find cutting them out far easier. It also puts a good amount of heat through them, which also makes them easy to push out. As you can see, that other one I've barely touched the surface on either. So now it's time to actually install our new joints, which is, say, I did want to have one over here not so long ago. Where have I put that? Oh, I'll just get the other one for the purposes of this clip. So there's a multitude of ways you can install these. Again, the proper correct way is with a hydraulic press, but I don't have one, hence why I got these out by cutting them. And by the way, how I get these out is I'll start them off with a hammer. There's nothing high-tech about how I get these out. Then I move on to a similarly sized socket, put over, and then just hammer them out the rest of the way. Works absolutely fine for these. You might struggle with a more heavy-duty car ball joints, but for these it's absolutely fine. Well, there's my other ball joint. So the way I get these in is fairly similar. You do not want to touch the thread, and you don't want to damage this section of the ball joint at all, because that's going to cause you problems. So the way I do it, I clean up the surface first, inside with a bit of sandpaper. Then I put a little bit of copper grease in there, just to help it along. It won't harm it at all. Then I remove the castle nut. I also remove the rubber of the ball joint. I might not be able to do this now with my fingers. Nope, bear with me. Okay, well I normally remove the rubbers to prevent damaging them, but these are a bit stiff. I think I may puncture them if I try and really leather them off, so I'm going to leave them as they are. And I don't think it's going to affect, because on these particular ones you've got a steel lip there. So then I find a socket that fits snugly over the entire joint. Doesn't sit on the shaft or the threads. And as you can see, it is touching the rubber, but that's sitting directly on a steel component, so I shouldn't have any trouble. And then I put it in the way it needs to go. So this is, which one's this? This is our upper control arm, so it needs to go in from there. So obviously, as I clean it up, put a bit of copper grease in. I put my joint in like so. Make sure it's on a level surface. I tend to use this steel flat surface with my vise. Get the socket over it and literally hammer it in. They normally go in extremely easily, to be honest. Well, I say extremely easily, you'll have to hit them a bit, but they're not normally a real problem. The tolerances on them aren't that tight. So I'll have a go at getting this one in and I'll be back. Alright, so I got both joints in with very minimal damage to my rubbers, which is good. You see that one. Top. You want to get it so you can see the gap for your C-clip. So once you've got the two ball joints installed, you want to install the C-clip. I've dropped mine on the floor somewhere, so I'm going to have to go and find them. But once I've got the C-clips on, I'll put all the bike back together. There's pretty much no point in me filming it, because it's exactly the same as the process of taking it apart. But once it's back together, I'll show you the finished product. Okay, right, as you can see, all my suspension is now back together. There's absolutely no play in it now. I'll move the bike before it moves the actual suspension. The rest of my components are good. My track rod, as you can see, no play at all. No play in my suspension bush, lower or upper. No play in my A-arm bushes. So yeah, that's job done for this. As you can see, got the split pins installed and everything. I've still got the other side to do because I'm waiting on two more ball joints to come in. The CV boot to place on the other side, which I'll show you doing, probably. Just use a stretch CV boot, it's well easy. We'll do a little video servicing this bike, and possibly some other bits depending on what comes up, perhaps something with the carburetor, but yeah, I'll see you in the next one.